to the Lifestyles Unlimited Real Estate Investor Radio Show, a real estate investment program. Listen and learn how to use real estate to build wealth and passive income streams for you and your family. We bring you experts every day to discuss and answer your questions on everything from single-family homes all the way up to 600-plus unit apartment complexes. And now, the Lifestyles Unlimited Real Estate Investor Radio Show.
Hey, happy Sunday to you, and welcome to the show. This is Andy Webb with Lifestyles Unlimited, and as always, we are working on your financial freedom. Hey, I've got a great show queued up for you today. It's going to be more of a practical show. We are going to focus on a very key process to our real estate investing. We are going to focus on the leasing process. And this will be targeted in large part to maybe single-family houses and maybe those of you that are into small multifamily. In other words, you don't have a big apartment community with on-site leasing staff, managers, maintenance, and so on, right? You're managing perhaps the day-to-day and doing the lease up yourself. Right, certainly an option. So we're going to talk about leasing. And, I do like to switch back and forth from one week to the next between a practical nuts and bolts type of show and mindset shows because, my mindset is vitally important. You don't want to neglect that and just focus on those nuts and bolts. If you don't understand why Lifestyles Unlimited members get off of that traditional, that conventional wisdom path. The one we talk about it. Go to school, get good grades so that you can get into a good name brand college and accrue a ton of student loan debt so that you can get a job, right? And now you can try to pay down that crippling debt while scrimping, saving, putting money aside into a retirement or savings account and doing that for 40, 50, maybe 60 years. Right, in hopes of retiring one day and not outliving your money. So Lifestyles members, we seek an alternative. And we do that because we've switched our mindset. So mindset shows are certainly important, okay? We see and we understand that alternative and we've changed our mindsets. And, interestingly, another mindset problem, so to speak, that people have is harboring unfounded fears. For some reason, one of those often revolves around our topic today. It revolves around leasing. And I know when I talk to people, new people, right, I hear it all the time. Folks that are thinking about getting into real estate, a couple of their questions that they're going to ask me every time. What if I can't lease the house? What do I do? Or what if I pick a bad tenant? And I get it. You've heard someone talk about the problems they've had, somebody that maybe wasn't quite the educated type of investor like we are at Lifestyles Unlimited. And I'll tell you what, if you follow the right model, these fears that you're feeling or perceiving, it's not going to be an issue. I'll give you a couple examples here in just a second, but bottom line, the right model, what is it? Well, our model is best product, best price. To put it succinctly in 4 words, best product, best price. When you put the best product on the market, whether it's an apartment unit or a house, we're going in and we're fully renovating. We're making that thing shine. We're taking very often a distressed asset, fixing everything that needs to be fixed, replacing things that might break down in the near term, right, in the next 3 to 5 years. Really shining. That's the best product. And we're marketing it at the best price. We're not going for the very, very tip top, going just a little bit below. You're going to lease a lot faster, by the way. Shave $10-20 off of that rent, stay under market. You're giving up $120 to $240 on the year. But if you rent 2 weeks faster than the guy down the road who's at the tip top of the market, guess what? You've made that money back many times over. And you're not vacant, right? We don't want to be vacant. So best product, best price. Guess what that's going to get you? It's going to get you the best people. Now, that said, we're going to work today through that leasing process. And, I put this out there last week that this would be the topic for today's show. I've gotten some good questions from folks, both in email this past week, not to mention just over the years, talking to people. And I've distilled these sundry questions into a couple of areas, a couple of components, let's say, of the process that we're going to hit. And I also want to go back to a question that I got last week from a caller. Scott had called in and asked about President Trump's executive orders. President Trump had signed 4 of these towards the end of the last week, and one of those concerned evictions. So what exactly did the president say? Well, stay tuned, and I will get into that later in the show. It ties out a little bit better later when we're talking through a certain piece of that leasing process. So we'll get to that. But first, before we get into the nuts and bolts of the leasing process, I want to share a couple of comments that I was emailed by. Actually, these are both Lifestyles members. First of all, John, he's here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area just like I am. And he said, I wanted to pass along my single-family experience during the coronavirus. He says all 4 of my residents, so he's got 4 single-family houses, all 4 of my residents continued to pay rent with no problem. That's great. And we're seeing that all over the place. A lot of people out there that are not investors are thinking, oh boy, it's about to hit the fan, but it hasn't. Part of that goes back to our motto, best product, best price. Running a good process like we're going to talk about today yields the best people, and those people want to stay in that great house or that great apartment community. They picked that for a reason, and that's why they continue to pay their rents, So anyhow, John says, no problem so far collecting rent. Now, he does go on to mention that he had 2 turns in the past month. So meaning in 2 of his houses, one family said, hey, they gave their notice, say, hey, we're moving on, buying a house, whatever. He gets that house does his make ready, gets it ready for the next family, they move in. That's a turn, okay? And he had 2 of those in the last month. And get this, one of those leased in a single day, and the other one leased in only a week. And on top of that, he had a total rent bump of $115 a month. So he's bringing in more money to his bottom line, right? More cash flow. That's what we retire on. And he leased in no time at all. So that fear that you have, get rid of it. Decouple from that. It's not relevant. In normal markets, it's not a problem. And even right now, it's not a problem. I got another email, Dan and Kathy, and the question they put to me, is it just us, or are your rentals just flying off the shelf? The demand out here is crazy, they said. And they're right. Now, I've had 2 turns myself this year, one in April, one in June. Same story. Took me a week in each case to get a signed lease with great people. So if you've got questions, give me a call, 855-497-4335, 855-497-4335, or ask Andy at luinc.com. Send me an email. We'll be right back. We'll address a fundamental question to kick off the leasing process. Stay tuned.
Del Walmsley talks about buying your way back from corporate America through real estate.
A massive change in my life. My personal residence I lived in was a 1-bedroom condo, cost $425 a month. This covered it. My automobile car payment was only $300 and some a month. This covered it. I was buying my way back from corporate America. I could feel it.
Lifestyles Unlimited will teach you how to buy your way back from corporate America. Get in control. Get into our live online free workshop. Register at lifestylesunlimitedworkshop.com.
Warning, listening to the Lifestyles Unlimited Real Estate Investor Radio Show will change your life. We will teach you how to create wealth and passive income so you can be financially free. And now, back to your host.
Welcome back to the show. This is Andy Webb, and on today's show, we're talking through the nuts and the bolts of the leasing process, okay? I want you to understand this process. There are some key components that you want to think about, especially if you're just thinking about getting started as an investor, right? As a real estate investor, single family or multifamily, doesn't matter. We have to lease up our properties. That's the name of the game. Do we just want warm bodies in there to get rid of that vacancy? Of course not. We want to have the best people, and we get there by putting on the market the best product at the best price, like we said in the first segment. Hey, if you missed the first segment, if you've missed any of our other shows and you want to catch up, go to lifestylesunlimited.com and click on the radio tab. And we do have a YouTube channel. You might check that out. We're also on Facebook and all the other social media platforms, so worth taking a look. Find that mode that you prefer. And when it comes to leasing, there's a fundamental question that you're going to want to ask yourself. What's it going to rent for? No, that's not it. Should I have pets? That's not it either. What kind of selection criteria? Although important, important question, that's not it either. The fundamental question is, are you going to lease it yourself or are you going to outsource? Are you going to DIY, do it yourself, or outsource to maybe a leasing agent, a realtor? If you plan to work with a property management company and fully hand over your house or portfolio, they'll do the leasing for you, of course. And that's going to be the most passive route, right? To use a property manager for everything. But that's the question I get. Hey, Andy, should I lease the house myself? It sounds like it could be a lot of work. I am working a full-time job. Well, you'll have to weigh that. And we'll talk about a couple things you can do to save time if you want to do it yourself. But if not, outsource. Now, maybe you don't want to hand over the whole business to a property management company. Maybe you just want help getting that house leased. There are people out there called leasing agents. That's what they do. A lot of property managers will do just that piece as well. They'll price that separately. Right? So if you're a member at Lifestyles Unlimited, you can go out to the vendor hub on our online portal and find those property managers, for example, that can help you out. Right? They've got the experience. They know the markets. As far as a leasing agent, what do? They find you the resident, And then it's all up to you now. You go on with managing the property. It's pretty easy. And of course, obviously, if you want to do it yourself, you got to check your schedule, right? Make sure that that's going to allow for that. And really, we recommend that you do this yourself, at least for the first couple of houses, so that you gain familiarity with the process. So that when you do hire that leasing agent on house number 3 or 4, you can tell what they're doing and if they're doing it right, the way you want them to, let's say, or that property manager. That's what we did. First 2 houses, we did the lease-up process ourselves. As it were, the third house was way the heck far away, 50 miles door to door, which if you're familiar with traffic in Dallas-Fort Worth outside of the pandemic era, right, it can get pretty thick. So we didn't want to deal with that. I was working full-time at the time, so was my wife. So we hired a leasing agent. It made it very easy. And she got us a great family that stuck around. I think they were there for 4 or 5 years. Good period of time. But you got to look at your schedule, okay? And if you're not sure which route to go, talk to a mentor. Ask a mentor for help. If you don't have one, go check out Lifestyles Unlimited. That's what we do. We are an education and mentoring group. We educate people on real estate investing, and we mentor them. If you're not familiar with this, if you're catching the show for the first time, here's what I want you to do. Go check out freeworkshoplivestream.com. And you can register for our free workshop, and you'll learn all about lifestyles. You'll learn about investing in single-family houses. You'll learn about investing in multifamily at a very upper level, right, picture. What makes sense? How do the numbers work very, very broadly? How to retire in 5 years or less. You can do it. You absolutely can, but you can learn more at freeworkshoplivestream.com. And again, you're not going to get into the nuts and bolts there, but you'll get that mindset picture like we talked about in the first segment. Mindset is tremendously important. It really is. So fundamental question, do you want to do it yourself or do you want to outsource? Even if you're not a people person, I'll tell you this, you can do this part. I'm a pretty quiet, shy guy, right? I'm on the radio talking, but I am very quiet. And I've learned over time that I can do this. You can do it too if you want to go that route. Now, number 2, right? First thing is that fundamental question, do it yourself or not, outsource. Number 2, this is not putting the cart in front of the horse. You really need to think ahead. Think up to where you're signing that lease. Think up to where you're handing over that care of services pamphlet, right, to your resident. You want to get all of your documentation together now. Do it before you get down that path of leasing, because you want to have, from a process perspective, I can tell you that as you go and market that house, you're going to get questions. You're going to get questions from interested parties. If you're leasing a house, you're going to get folks that are moving out of an apartment. They're going to have a ton of questions. How does this work? How does that work? And you're going to rely on your lease to answer a lot of those questions. You're going to rely on your resident selection criteria to answer a lot of those questions. So you want to put this suite of documents together ahead of time. Okay, so what are we talking about? Well, I just mentioned resident selection criteria. I'm not going to go into details here. We'll hit upon this a little bit later as its own sort of module, I suppose. But very, very important. Extremely important. If you don't have this, why don't you? If you are an active investor, resident selection criteria, application, hugely important. You want to get as much information up front about the people that are applying to reside in your unit, in your house, in your apartment. You want a very thorough application. Now, I happen to have a realtor's license. I use the Texas Association of Realtors application. If you're a member of one of the apartment associations, which we are, you can also be a member and own single-family houses. That's perfectly fine. You can use the Texas Apartment Association applications as well, right? If you're neither, well, create your own. Work with your real estate attorney, but you want something very thorough that's going to find out information about current landlord, current employer, prior employer. Do they have any credit issues? Does anybody smoke? Have they had any dings to their credit? Any pets? If so, what type? What breeds? It's important because you may disqualify certain aggressive breeds. So you want to gather a lot of information, and the application, fundamentally, it's got to be fully complete. If there are gaps anywhere, that should lead you to ask the question, well, what's missing here? Let me tell you a quick story. A couple of years ago, we leased out a house over near Fort Worth. Got a very good-looking application. All the blanks were filled. Everything looked good at an upper level. But once we started looking at the dates on the current and the prior landlord, and there was a year gap in between the two. Okay, that's kind of odd. So we looked at the copy of the driver's license, because you want to get that as well. You need to have correct ID, make sure who you're dealing with. And there was an address on that license that was, and the license itself was issued within that year gap. So we just did a real quick dig. Went to the Justice of the Peace for Tarrant County, as it were, and sure enough, did a quick search on the name. You ultimately, when you get to the background check, you're going to pay for all of this, but we just did a quick check, and lo and behold, an eviction. So they're trying to hide this within that year gap. If you're not paying attention, if you don't have a complete form, you're liable to miss that sort of thing. So the application needs to be fully completed, okay? You want to have your lease ready to go. Like I said, some questions that you will get are going to tie back to what's in your lease, and you need to be ready to answer that. You need to be familiar with your lease. If you don't have one, your realtor, if you're working with one, will have one for you. Property manager will have one for you. If you're a member at Lifestyles Unlimited, we've got some documents on our hub, or go talk to your real estate attorney. Now, we're going to go into a break. I want to wrap up the document section with just a couple quick comments, and then we're going to talk about timing, when to list your house, and where to list your house. So stay tuned. We will be right back with the Lifestyles Unlimited Real Estate Investor Radio Show.
Welcome back to the Lifestyles Unlimited Real Estate Investor Radio Show. It's time to turn up the volume and fine-tune your passive income plan so you can create the lifestyle you've always wanted.
Welcome back to the show. This is Andy Webb, and today on the Lifestyles Unlimited Real Estate Investor Radio Show, we are taking a look at the leasing process. I happen to be going through the leasing process right now. That's in part engendered this topic for me. And I did reach out to folks that, hey, have you got any questions? Let me know by email. And I do thank the folks that sent in questions and comments. Certainly helped me structure this a bit. And if you've got any questions, the number here is 855-497-4335, or send me an email to askandy@luinc.com. So we were just talking about documents that you're going to need to have together, right, when you start that leasing process, hopefully prior. Some of these will inform how the process flows. We mentioned the lease. We mentioned having a very good, thorough application. By the way, as part of that application, you want to be sure to have a single page that is an authorization to release information. I mentioned you're going to collect data on employers and on landlords, both current and prior. Some of those are going to ask you for that form. Okay, so make sure you get that authorization. Otherwise, they will not release that information, and you'll have trouble gathering the information you need, right, to make a solid decision. And of course, we mentioned the lease. With the lease, you'll often have any number of addenda. That may be a pet addendum, right? You've got to think about whether or not you want to allow pets in your unit, in your house, in your apartments. And we're talking about pets. Remember, emotional support animals, service animals, those are not pets. Okay, they are allowed in. You cannot discriminate. But if it is a pet, are you allowing dogs? Are you allowing cats? Do you charge a pet security deposit or a pet non-refundable pet fee? Right, which is essentially accelerated rent. I like that one. I know they're going to do a little bit of damage, so why not collect that up front? Or a pet rent. Some people charge $10, some people charge $25 per pet, right? You're going to have that addendum if you do allow pets. Okay, that's going to have a liability piece to it as well that says, hey, this animal doesn't bite. It's not known to bite. It has a good disposition that your tenant is assuring you, right? So you want to get that signed. If you're buying older property, be sure to get that lead-based paint addendum to go with your lease. 1978 and older, you need to have that. Okay, that's actually a federal HUD requirement. You may want to have a bed bug addendum. You may want to have a mold. We use it's a mold information sheet, really, that just tells you how to prevent mold. If you notice a leak, let me know, first of all. But what do you do to temporarily to immediately remediate that, and so on. And of course, care instructions. A lot of people, maybe coming out of an apartment into a house, for example, and maybe they're coming from a fully carpeted environment into one with laminate. Well, what do you do about laminate? Can I wet mop on that or not? So you need to be prepared to give people clear instructions, right? You want them to take care of that property, so arm them the information they need. So let's move on. Let's talk about timing. I get this question a lot too. When should I start marketing my house? Well, I think, and we'll talk about where as well, where should I market it? But from a when perspective, I think there are two cases. There's the case where you just bought the house and you're going to get it leased, right, after the renovations. And then there's the case where you've owned the house, somebody is living in there now, but they're moving on. Right, I'm going through a lease in this precise situation. The family bought a house, right? Great rates right now, interest rates, whether you're an investor or buying an owner-occupied house. Great time to strike, and people are doing that. That's great. So in the first case where you just bought that house, right, you're getting ready to fix it up, right? Maybe it's a huge rehab. Maybe it's a small rehab, right? It could take a couple weeks. It could take, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, depends on what you're doing. Go ahead and put the sign out there in the yard. Start marketing. Let the neighbors know. Get some information about the house together and put that on a flyer and get that in the window, right? How many bedrooms, how many baths? So that people see the sign, then they go look at the window, they say, okay, here's the rent. Here's what they're going to do. A lot of times the blinds are down. You can see inside the house. You can see the carpet's been pulled up. Is it going to look like that? No, it's not. It's going to have this flooring. It's going to have this paint, brushed nickel fixtures, and so on and so forth. Let them know what you're doing. And if you're meeting someone there to show them the house, describe it. Share your vision. Now, a lot of people may not be able to see that vision, even standing there listening to you. So if you've done this before, if you have multiple houses already in your portfolio or multiple apartments, get some pictures from a prior project because it's probably going to look the same. It should. You should follow the same model. Right? It's more cost effective. Show them those pictures. Say, well, see what we did here in this room, in this bedroom. We got that brushed nickel ceiling fan here. We got that gray tone paint that we put in. And we went in here with this, nice frisé carpet. This is what we're going to be doing here. Then they can see the picture, right? Have that ready to go. So that's the first case. Now, in the second case, right, you didn't just buy the house. You got it fixed up. You got it rented out some time ago. And now the family's moving on, right? The resident is moving on. A lot of what dictates your next steps are going to be what you've been doing to date. Number one, do you do regular walkthroughs? Do you know the condition of the property? Do you know what you're going to do in terms of work to get it rent ready for the next family? How much time is that going to take? Now, you should be doing regular walkthroughs. If you talk to any of our property managers at Lifestyles Unlimited, they do those regularly, quarterly, to keep an eye on things and fix things as needed so that house is show worthy as soon as that resident gives notice. You should be doing the same. But at a minimum, you're going to want to go by there, check it out. Again, I'm assuming you're doing this DIY, right? Not with a property manager. You're doing it yourself. See what the condition is. See what sort of work you're going to need to do to get it ready. And what are your notification requirements in your lease? Some people use 30 days, meaning the resident, prior to terminating the lease, needs to give 30 days notice ahead of the termination of that lease. So if they plan to move out September 30th, they need to tell you in writing by the end of August. Right? So is it a 30-day termination notice? Is it 45? Is it 60? A lot of leases have been moving to that later time frame as the market allows. And as soon as you know, and as soon as you check the condition, is it show worthy now? I hope it is. Get it listed. Now, where do you list it? That's another question as well. And see part one, right? That very first discussion, that fundamental question that we answered. Are you going to do it yourself or are you going to outsource? If you're outsourcing, you're outsourcing probably to a property manager or a leasing agent. They're going to put it in the MLS, right? The multiple listing source. And that's going to push it out to sundry other online platforms, Zillow, Trulia, Hotpad, stuff like that, apartments.com, realtor.com, and so on. I happen, like I said, I think earlier, I happen to have a license and I put it in the MLS and boom, it goes out to all these sites. And I start to get emails from all these different sites. And I'll tell you, if you're going to go that DIY route, that do-it-yourself route, focus on Zillow to start with. That's where I by far get the most of my leads that are coming from a non-realtor source. And in fact, John, he quoted an email from him earlier. He rented one of his houses in 1 day and another in a week. He had 2 turns this season, 1 day and 1 week. And he said he used Zillow and he's had the best luck advertising on that platform. So if you're going to go the DIY route, that's a good way to go. Now, your first listing is free, and then they charge some nominal amount per week for subsequent listings. So if you're listing it and leasing within a week, hey, you're minimizing your cost. And then that may be market specific. So if you're listening outside of Texas, you may want to see what Zillow's doing in your specific market and any of those other platforms. So when do you list it? Where do you list it? We just talked about that. Now, you've listed this house. You've listed your apartment complex, and you're starting to get feedback, right? You're starting to get those emails, and your phone is starting to ring. Biggest thing I can tell you when it comes to showing your house is answer your phone. It blows my mind. Like I said, I'm going through the leasing process now. I've shown my house that we've got listed a couple of times now, and every time I've heard, "Thank you for answering your phone." First of all, people out there are putting their houses up for lease, and they're not responding. If that's you, what are you doing? You got to respond to people. That's going to move it a heck of a lot faster. So answer your phone. If you don't want to give out your personal number, get a Google Voice number, record a specific message relevant to that property that you've got listed for lease so that people can hear at least a little bit about that. Maybe put some information on that voicemail about the number of beds, number of baths, rent, square footage, when it's going to be ready, right? So that you can at least keep things turning. But get back to them, okay? Now, when we continue, I'm going to finish up at the topic of showing the house, and I want to tell you, how do you deal with scheduling? You're going to get a lot of requests, people that want to go at this time of day and tomorrow morning and in 1 hour from right now. Can you make it? And so on, and we'll talk about that. So stick around. This is the Lifestyles Unlimited Real Estate Investor Radio Show. This is Andy Webb. We'll be right back.
One of the things I'd like to get across is that your whole life you wanted to make a change, right? But you've never had the time. This might be it, because we have online education that you can get involved in.
We're now going to bring the free workshop to the entire country and really the world. Anybody who is interested can participate in that. We're going to live stream that free workshop and have people online with you on the live stream, talking with you, answering questions, interacting. You're really going to get a great feel for the Lifestyles community from this. And you can register for that. So if you want to find out about us, this is a great way to take a look at us and what we do.
Lifestyles Unlimited has been helping people succeed since 1990. Join us for our free online real estate workshop and learn the 7 principles we teach to run our businesses and provide for our families. Register at lifestylesunlimitedworkshop.com. That's lifestylesunlimitedworkshop.com.
We're back with the Lifestyles Unlimited Real Estate Investor Radio Show. We're here to answer your questions and help you become financially free.
Welcome back to the show. This is Andy Webb, and we are talking about the leasing process right now. And I gave you a couple comments from listeners earlier that said, hey, I leased my house in one day. I leased another one in a week. Another investor I know said, hey, they're flying off the shelves, these houses. Now, you might be listening to this and thinking, man, it sounds like you're just doing nonstop leasing. That's the beauty of this. That's not the case. You know, as you build up a bigger portfolio, you're going to naturally have some attrition, let's say, throughout the years, you know, in a given year. But boy, I took a look back at my portfolio. We actually bought our very first house this month 8 years ago. And added a couple pretty quickly, then waited a bit, built up some more capital, then got maybe 5 back-to-back very quickly, and then, you know, built up some more capital. That's kind of how it went for us. And I was looking at the portfolio, and boy, we've got one guy that's been in place for 7 years. Another family in a house, 6 years, another in the same city, in fact, 6 years. So they're really sticking around for a long time. And a lot of that goes back to best product, best price. That's getting us the best people in our properties, and they're sticking around. That's great for us. If once you get that house rented, you want to keep it, keep the folks in place as long as you can, because there is naturally a cost when you have to do a turn, whether you're hiring a leasing agent or a property manager to do that for you, doing some minor repairs, the brief, quick make ready and so on and so forth. But the good news is a lot of people stick around for a very long time, and I love that. Now, when it comes time to showing the house, we talked about that. Most important thing you can do if you're doing this on your own, if you're listing the house on your own, is answer your phone. Reply to those emails. Don't keep people waiting. They're going to move on very quickly. A lot of them are waiting to the last minute to look for their house. I hear a lot of people saying, I need it ASAP. Others are planning well in advance, 2 months down the line. So it's all over the place, but you need to respond very, very quickly or they will move on. Now, that said, you are not at the beck and call of that interested party. Zillow, I mentioned that as a primary platform to list these houses. It makes it very easy for people to just push a button, I'm interested, or just push a button, 10 a.m. showing, 6 p.m. showing, whatever it is. Makes it very easy for them. So I think a lot of this interest that I get or these emails that I get maybe is not fully thought out. So don't get those emails and start to panic. Oh man, he wants a showing tonight at 7 and that one wants a showing tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. and noon the next day after that. And how am I going to handle all this? You are the boss. Pick some times that are amenable to your schedule and set a few times, maybe one during the week in the evening and one on the weekend, right? And work around those times. Now, in the past, I tell you, do an open house. Open houses are great. I love open houses. Among other things, it's a great way to create competition. You get a lot of people in that property. They're eyeing each other thinking, oh boy, I can tell they're going to want to apply, but I really like this house. You might even get an offer for a higher rent. I've had that happen. It's a great way to create competition. And more importantly, it's a great way to maximize my time. So I'm not driving back and forth, scrambling here and there. That's going to be stressful. That's going to eat a lot of your time. That's going to leave a bad taste in your mouth. So you need to be organized and structure things in a way that's amenable, like I said, to your schedule, or hand it off. Become passive in this respect. Hand it off to a leasing agent. Now, during the pandemic, open houses, maybe not the best idea. You don't need a big congregation of people moving through your house all at once. Now, I did go to an open house that a fellow investor had on a street where I happen to have a house listed as well, and he was having an open house, and here's how he managed it. He basically said, all right, line form's here, front door. One person comes in, they move through the house, and they exit through the garage. He's in there somewhere in the house to talk with them as they go through. I got in line, I toured his house, wanted to see what it looked like, and it flowed very well. And I noticed his sign was up a couple days, and then it was gone. He got it leased. So that might be an approach. And the other approach we're seeing right now with the pandemic is virtual showings. In fact, I just had a showing not too long ago at this house that we've got listed. The realtor went out there. Her client said, we don't want to come. We want to stay hunkered down. So they FaceTimed. Perfectly fine. Right? That works great. And I'll tell you, as part of my process, I've always gotten a lot of pictures right after rehab to document that condition to use, right, to give to my leasing agent to market, right, in the MLS or to put into the MLS myself or onto Zillow. What I've missed is getting great videos. So going forward, when I finish that rehab, I'm going to get that great picture set and get videos for this very reason so that we can have a virtual showing. Walk them through the property with that video that you've pre-recorded while you do a Zoom call or something like that. Virtual showings, that's the way to go. Now, you've shown the property, and we come to a very, very important, probably the most important part of this leasing process, applicant screening. And the most important component of the process is having a good resident selection criteria. It needs to spell out where you're going to draw the line on things like minimum income. Do you want to see 3 times the rent in gross household income? 3.5, 2.5, 4, what is it? Typically 3 times for houses. Apartments may be a little bit different. What are the minimum credit scores that you will allow? How do you handle past bankruptcies? What about evictions, criminal history, pets, and so on? You want to line all that out in this selection criteria and have that applicant sign it when they submit that application, when they hand over those application fees. This is going to do 2 things for you. Number 1, it's going to give you clarity. So if something comes in too low, you don't have to mull it over. You don't have to hem and haw. It didn't meet your criteria. Don't fudge. Don't be fickle with that. Decline. Number 1, gives you clarity. Number 2, it protects you. You've had it signed by the applicant or applicants, right? Everybody 18 and over needs to apply separately and sign this resident selection criteria and pay separate application fees because you're going to run a separate background, credit, criminal, rental history check on each and every one of them. And by signing it, they're acknowledging that we recognize what you're going to be looking at. And if we are declined, you're not on the hook to give us our money back because guess what? You've now turned and paid that to a third-party service. It's going to run that check for you, so that's going to protect you. Now, a question that I've been hearing is, should I relax my leasing criteria right now given the pandemic and the state of the economy? What do you think? No, absolutely not. Stay firm. You're better off waiting a little bit longer and getting the right person or resident or family into that house than relaxing your criteria and regretting it a week, a month, or even a year later. So stick to your leasing criteria. You put those together for a reason. Hold firm. Now, this is a good time to talk about President Trump's executive order as relates to evictions, because if you do a bad job with your screening, you may put somebody in that you then have to get rid of. And I had the question last week from a listener, Scott. He asked, well, President Trump, he signed 4 executive orders. One of those concerned evictions. What exactly has he now imposed upon us? Well, the good news is that President Trump did not extend the eviction moratorium that was part of the CARES Act. So that's expired. July 24th, that's done. And he did not impose any new eviction moratoria or anything like that. So for now, you can evict for non-payment of rent. Now, it's going to be subject to, any state, city, local restrictions. That 30-day notice to vacate will still apply if you have a property, right, that's covered under the CARES Act. And also be aware, if you do have a single-family house or 1 to 4 units, could be up to a quad, the Federal Housing Finance Agency did put its own moratorium into place through August 31st that prevents evictions for non-payment of rent. So that is still in place. Multifamily, for some reason, was left out of that, but they did extend that. So we've just got that in place for a couple more weeks. But again, check with your county, check with your city, check with your state. They may have imposed their own, their own rules. So, Scott, that was the detail around President Trump's eviction, I guess, part of that executive order. Basically, all he did is give direction to the Secretary of Health and Human Services, to the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development to consider measures as needed. Is it necessary to impose any sort of moratorium or anything like that? Is it necessary to offer financial assistance, right? It's just a little bit of direction to those entities. So a lot of information. I've actually got more, but I'm running a little bit shy on time. So what I want to do now is just shift gears and tell you that we got into some of the nuts and bolts today. There's a lot more. And there's a lot more besides just the leasing process. There's a lot that goes into buying, renovating, advertising, leasing, and managing a rental house or apartments. And the good news is you don't have to sit around and wait for me to come to another topic that hits one of those items. We've got our Financial Freedom Program going on live, virtually, ongoing. right? Each month here, we're offering that. I'm going to give you the website where you can go to learn more. It's financialfreedomlivestream.com. And that's where you have the opportunity to join and become a Financial Freedom Program member. That's how I got started with Lifestyles, like I mentioned, 8 years ago. Right, this gives you access to that vendor hub that I mentioned. This also gives you, more importantly, for our topic today, access to our 2-day seminar. And that's where we go into single-family investing on day one and get into these nuts and bolts. Talk about the leasing process. Get into more detail. And then on day 2, get into multifamily. And then you, again, are presented with the fundamental question. Ooh, I liked that single family. Now I've heard about multifamily. Which direction do I want to go? But to get there, you need to take part. You need to participate. So go to financialfreedomlivestream.com, learn more about joining. It's heavily discounted. And attend that 2-day. You're going to get more of the nuts and bolts, learn a heck of a lot more, and start down that path. And remember, everything we talked about today, it's not the money. It's the lifestyle. That's that mindset change that you really got to focus on as well. This is Andy Webb. I thank you for listening today. This is the Lifestyles Unlimited Real Estate Investor Radio Show. You have a good day.
The Lifestyles Unlimited Real Estate Investor Radio Show is for entertainment purposes only. Please consult a professional regarding your personal investment needs. Nothing presented on the Lifestyles Unlimited Real Estate Investor Radio Show constitutes an endorsement, recommendation, offer, or solicitation to buy or sell any product or security.